Roger Ebert was one of our nation's most beloved film critics. With his partner Gene Siskel, Roger took film criticism from the pages of newspapers and into our living rooms with the television show At the Movies. Throughout his life, Roger shared his love of film, not only by conveying what makes a good movie, but which films were his favorites. This is not a show about those movies. This is a show about the movies Roger loathed, the films he despised, the movies he absolutely hated. Movies like Daddy Daycare. On this episode of Does This Movie Suck? Hello friends and welcome to the show. My name is Scott and welcome to our journey through Roger Ebert's 2007 book, Your Movie Sucks. This week we're exploring the 2003 film Daddy Daycare starring Eddie Murphy, Jeff Garlin, and Steve Zahn. This film finds Eddie Murphy at the most challenging stage of his career. The early 2000s weren't very good for Eddie Murphy. More on that in a moment, but first let's start with our blurb check. It's where we check the poll quotes from movie boxes to see if they're accurate. The quote on the Daddy Daycare movie box is from George Pinocchio from ABC7 in Los Angeles. He said, "Eddie Murphy and his comedy cohorts deliver fun for the whole family." I'm finding through this experiment that broadcast television quotes are nearly impossible to nail down. They just don't keep those things around on the internet. Luckily, George still works at ABC7 in LA. So I sent him a tweet. George told me that he didn't even know he was on the cover of the DVD, joking that bigger names must have not agreed with him back in 2003. He told me that he would have to rewatch the film to see if his review still stands, so it seems like they didn't misquote him. And for the record, I told him that I would not ask him ever to rewatch Daddy Daycare just for me. So with that, let's take a look at Daddy Daycare, a movie that rates at a whopping 27% on the Rotten Tomatoes tomato meter. The movie begins with one of its many pee-pee poo-poo jokes. High Fidelity has really ruined this song for me. Now that's how you use this song effectively, not this slowly edited slog towards a pee-pee poo-poo joke. That joke is just lazy. The second the bathroom appears on the screen, is there ever any question of how that joke is going to play out, even down to the music drop? The boy heads downstairs and we're introduced to his workaholic father. Eddie Murphy plays Charlie. Charlie Murphy! No, that's Eddie's brother. Eddie plays a character named Charlie. Murphy! Sorry, I have to do this. Editor, no editing. Editor, no editing. Editor, no editing. Aw, man. I hate that guy. Anyway, Eddie plays a character named Charlie Hitton. Charlie works as a food developer. He's been working on a new cereal that's loaded with veggies. His work partner is also his best friend, Phil, who's played by Jeff Garlin. The focus group does not go well.
You're the first kid! Help! Do you know what we call it? Veggie-O!
This cereal sucks!
They're turning on us.
Oh my god, that scene is painful. That scene alone has 4 pratfalls. 4 were 6 minutes into the movie. If you were to take a shot every time someone goes to the bathroom, gets hit in the groin, or falls down in this movie, you would be dead. You would cease to exist.
Hey.
Look, this place is Princeton for preschoolers.
Yeah, let's just hurry up so we won't be late for the orientation.
Hey, what's all orientation about? It's preschool. They're gonna be playing with blocks, right?
Yeah.
Charlie and his wife, played by Regina King, make an appointment to get their son into the evil and expensive daycare ran by Mrs. Harridan. She's played by Angelica Houston. The number of solid comedic or soon-to-be famous actors that got roped into being in this movie is kind of astounding.
What does he mean, killing that?
Why are you listening to Bruce, huh? Nothing's being killed. You know this guy is a clown.
We're killing it.
Hey, come on, Jim. We had one bad test.
And because Charlie's cereal sucks, the company he works for decides to shut the entire department down. Kids want cereals with sugar, after all.
I lost my J-O-B.
You lost your J-O-B?
I got F-I-R-E-D. Me and 300 other people.
Don't worry about this. I'm a guy in demand, and I have a new job in a week. A week.
Because we know the name of the movie, we know Charlie is going to have trouble finding work, but the movie attempts a 6 weeks later joke anyway. Like most of the jokes in the film, it falls flat. Here's the thing about Daddy Daycare. The comedy is largely targeting children. Pratfalls, pee-pee poo-poo jokes, largely targeting kids. I mean, some of them might hit adults, but mostly for kids. But the problems the characters have are largely adult problems, like losing your job or reinventing yourself, like if you were to suddenly start a YouTube channel and talk to your cat about football or spend your time reviewing bad movies.
Hey, what if we use the emergency fund?
We can't. We already used it on the car payment.
Okay. There's no way around it.
This is a strange movie. The plot points are strictly split down the middle. It's a comedy for children, but a family drama for adults. The rest of the film you could probably guess, partly based on the name and partly because you've seen more than one movie in your life. After searching for a new daycare for their kids, Charlie and Phil find no suitable replacement for Mrs. Harridan's expensive school, so they decide to start their own. The guys begin advertising themselves around town. I'll give you one guess how this scene at a martial arts class ends. Is it A, Phil gets hit in the groin? It's A.
Hello, how are you?
This sequence happens exactly 11 seconds later. I'll give you multiple choices this time. Does Phil A, staple the paper to his finger, B, choice A, or C, choice A and B? You literally can't get it wrong. The guys open Daddy Daycare, but they have a hard time getting clients at first because men just can't be responsible enough to run a daycare.
Is this a daycare place?
They're guys. They're all guys.
They're what?
Excuse me, listen. We are two loving, caring parents, and we run a daycare center.
Couple of sickos is what you are.
Hey, miss, hey, how about a free trial offer?
Sickos!
But after one parent signs up, the dominoes start to fall and they have several kids. There's the kid that won't let go. There's the Flash. There's the girl that's allergic to everything. There's the one that's Elle Fanning. And it turns out the guys are really bad at running a daycare. And then the subplots start to occur. There are so many kids that Charlie's relationship with his own son starts to diminish. And then there's this. Phil cannot deal with his son's bodily functions.
Hey, that's your cue, man. You gotta go over there and deal with it.
I can't.
You can't.
I can't.
We get a flashback of Phil failing to be able to diaper his own offspring. Because of this, Charlie says he'll deal with Phil's kid, but just this once.
Okay, well, you go and do it with your bad self. You go and do it now. All right. You need anything, I'm right out here, okay?
And now, behold, the only part of the movie where I actually laughed because of Eddie Murphy. It's the only point in time where he tries to be funny.
I missed.
What does that mean?
I missed.
Oh, hell no.
That showed me that Eddie is still able to conjure some comedy, but in this movie, he's not really asked to be funny. Sick and tired of losing students to Daddy Daycare, Mrs. Harridan sicks state inspectors on Charlie and Phil. This has the adverse effect of making the guys a better daycare now that all of the rules are being pointed out to them and they're given time to comply. They also begin listening to the kids, incorporating how they would like to spend their days at the daycare.
More learning about things.
You have to feed our minds.
Okay, all right. You want to write that down, Marvin?
Feed our minds.
It's about this time that Charlie and Phil hire Marvin, the male guy from their old job that just happens to be a 30-something man-child who's really good with kids. He's played by Steve Zahn. Here's the thing, when Zahn's character arrives on the scene, the movie gets infinitely better because, unlike the rest of this nonsense, Steve Zahn's actually funny in this role.
What's
Excellent idea.
We can chase Joker.
Well, wait a second, buddy. That's Batman's bad guy. You're the Flash. So you want to be chasing...
Lex Luthor?
What have you been doing to these kids?
Daddy Daycare grows and grows until the state requires them to purchase a bigger building. The guys don't have enough money to get into a new building, so they hold a cookout to raise money. It's a cookout with bounce houses and music by Cheap Trick because they're always available to help out a daycare in need. Cheap Trick. And like the wacky racist villains they are, Mrs. Harridan and her sidekick Jenny decide to sabotage the festivities, which leaves the guys short of the money they need to buy the new building. About the same time, Charlie and Phil get an offer from their old job to come back because this is a movie and these things need to happen. Because they don't have the money for Daddy Daycare's new building and the state is going to shut them down if they don't get it, they decide to return to their old job.
What's the most important thing?
My kid.
Huh?
My kid, Jim. That's the most important thing, my kid.
After realizing that Daddy Daycare was more fulfilling than their 9-to-5 jobs, the guys quit. Charlie makes his last stand at Mrs. Harridan's school, they steal all of her clients, and Daddy Daycare flourishes. The end. All in all, it's not terrible in and of itself. There's no glaring out-of-focus shots, the acting is fine. It's not a poorly made film, it's just not excitingly made, and it's certainly not funny. So what in the world made me say this? I'm just going to warn you right now, the next one is terrible. What makes Daddy Daycare terrible is context. Movies aren't made in a vacuum. The artists involved, the creators, the actors, they're often graded against themselves. Do we see growth in these artists? Are they evolving? In this respect, Daddy Daycare finds Eddie Murphy at the beginning of the biggest downturn of his career. And his inability or his unwillingness to make this content better screws up Daddy Daycare's bell curve. So how did Eddie get to this point? How did he get from 48 hours to being the straight man in a family comedy about daycare? To answer this, we have to look back. Murphy rocketed to superstardom in the early 80s with the films 48 Hours and Trading Places, which were released during a successful stint on Saturday Night Live, which was struggling during the time period. Eddie followed up his 4-year stint on SNL with a series of blockbuster movies. Beverly Hills Cop and its sequel, along with Coming to America, were massive hits for Murphy. But as the 80s came to a close, Murphy's critical and box office success began to waver. Eddie was stuck in a cycle of making movies based on half-baked scripts where the producers were relying on Murphy to make the films good. While filming Beverly Hills Cop 3, it's reported that Eddie was deeply depressed. The director of that film, John Landis, also read the script to the original Beverly Hills Cop and said it was one of the worst scripts he had ever read. He figured that he'd make the third film funny along with Eddie, just like Martin Brest did with the original. If you've seen Beverly Hills Cop 3, you know that that's certainly not the case. It's at this point in Eddie's career where 3 things happened. 1. According to Landis, Murphy was becoming increasingly jealous of actors like Denzel Washington and Wesley Snipes, who were doing non-comedic roles and gaining critical acclaim and Oscar buzz. 2. Eddie had children, so he began wanting to make more family-oriented movies for them. And 3. Eddie was struggling with how to take control of his career. This last point led Eddie to start producing his own movies, the first of which was Vampire in Brooklyn, both a box office and critical bomb. If you look at Eddie's filmography from this point on, his career seems to be pulled in 4 different directions. When these 4 points meet, it's box office and critical gold. But when one of these points dominates over the others, it ends in disaster. Here are the 4 points. Point 1, Eddie is looking for meaty leading roles. Daddy Daycare would almost fit in this category, as Murphy's Charlie is a more dramatic role than the rest of the roles of the film. In this film, Murphy is the straight man to Garland's comedic character. Point 2, he's looking for, practically begging for, critical acclaim. Sometimes point 1 and point 2 work together. His 2006 Oscar-nominated performance in Dreamgirls fits these first 2 categories perfectly. Point 3, he wants to make something more family-friendly. Gone is the cursing, tough-talking cop from Detroit. Eddie now wants to make movies his kids can see. And number 4, he wants the role to highlight his versatility as an actor. For example, does the role include a wide range of emotions? Not all of Eddie's movies post Beverly Hills Cop 3 tick all of these boxes, but the movies that tick the most boxes are the most successful. The Nutty Professor was the first of such movies. It and Dr. Dolittle ticked 3 of those boxes, and they were huge successes. And in the early 2000s, Eddie would find a role that would tick all 4 boxes. It would be the role that would define him for the next decade.
We can stay up late, swapping manly stories, and in the morning, I'm making waffles.
Donkey was a perfect character for Eddie. It was a big, comedic role which allowed him to show his diversity in a family film. It brought him almost universal love and introduced Murphy to a new audience. Shrek is the best thing that Eddie would do for the next decade, even when the series wavered. I can say this with absolute confidence because 2000 through 2010 found Eddie Murphy at his absolute worst, ignoring what audiences wanted and churning out goofy family film after goofy family film. He ignored the good scripts and rested on his newfound fame from Shrek. He ignored most of those 4 rules that make a good Eddie Murphy movie. I can say this because I've seen a lot of them. They're horrific. Not in a vacuum, but if you take into account all that Murphy had accomplished beforehand, it's not hard to get depressed with what Eddie was doing. It should be noted that Eddie was nominated for an Oscar during this period, an Oscar he didn't win, but he did win the Razzie for Worst Actor of the Decade. Daddy Daycare finds Eddie Murphy in one of his first post-Shrek roles, right after the audience began to love him again. It's a role that feels like he's just cashing a paycheck. Show up, be Eddie Murphy, people will buy tickets. It's a pretty cynical way to be a movie star, but for this movie it worked. This film made a boatload of money. But the audience would quickly sour on Murphy, and the 2000s would be his worst decade as an actor. So does Daddy Daycare suck? Yes, it's a painfully unfunny film that's nearly saved by Steve Zahn in its 3rd act. But it's also a movie that wouldn't have existed if Eddie Murphy weren't cast in the lead role. This movie is a depressing sign of things to come for Murphy. By itself, it's not the worst movie I've ever seen, but when you waste a comedic talent like Eddie Murphy, it's inexcusable. But it's another one off the list. Be sure to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any of the episodes of our show. I've linked my Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram down in the description below if you want to follow me there for all the behind-the-scenes fun. And join us next time when we ask the question, does this movie suck? Thanks for watching.